In the flickering candlelight of a fortune-teller's tent, a young girl with golden hair extended her palm, hungry for knowledge of her future. What she received instead was a curse that would haunt her for decades, shaping every decision, every paranoia, every act of cruelty that would define her reign of terror. The witch spoke of 3 prophecies that night, 3 deaths that would mark the rise and fall of one of the most feared queens in the history of Westeros. 2 have already come to pass with devastating accuracy, but the 3rd, the most mysterious and debated prophecy in all of George R.R. Martin's epic saga, remains unfulfilled. The Valonqar prophecy, the promise of Cersei Lannister's doom at the hands of her little brother. But which little brother? In a world where prophecies twist like smoke and words carry double meanings, where family bonds are as sharp as Valyrian steel and twice as deadly, the identity of the Valonqar has become one of the most hotly contested mysteries in modern fantasy literature. Is it the obvious choice, Tyrion, the dwarf brother she's despised since birth? Could it be Jaime, her twin and lover, born mere moments after her, technically making him her younger brother? Or does the prophecy point to someone entirely unexpected? A dark horse candidate whose claim to the title Little Brother reveals itself only through careful examination of bloodlines, birth orders, and the intricate web of relationships that define the noble houses of Westeros? Tonight, we delve deep into the shadows of prophecy and politics, examining every clue, every character, and every compelling theory that might reveal the true identity of the one destined to wrap their hands around the pale white throat of the queen, who would be remembered as one of the most ruthless rulers in the 7 kingdoms. From the moment young Cersei first heard those fateful words in Maggie, the Frog's tent, to the complex political machinations that continue to unfold across 2 continents, we will unravel the mystery that has captivated millions of readers and viewers worldwide. This is the story of a prophecy written in blood, a tale of siblings bound by love and hatred in equal measure, and the ultimate question that may determine the fate of the Iron Throne itself. Who is the Valonqar? And when the time comes, will Cersei Lannister see her death approaching in the eyes of her killer? Or will the prophecy claim her life in a way that no one, not even the most dedicated scholars of Westerosi lore, could have predicted? The answer lies not just in the pages of ancient texts or the whispered rumors of court, but in understanding the very nature of prophecy itself, the way it bends and shapes around the actions of those who try to escape it, often ensuring their doom through the very measures they take to avoid it. For in the world of ice and fire, prophecy is not a gentle guide toward an inevitable future. It is a trap, carefully laid by fate itself, waiting for the moment when even the most cunning players of the Game of Thrones finally realize they were never playing to win. They were only playing to lose in the most spectacular way possible. The story begins, as all the best stories do, with a lie. Not the lie that Cersei told herself about her invincibility, nor the lie she told the world about her children's legitimacy, but the lie she told about why she sought out Maggie the Frog in the first place. Young Cersei Lannister, barely past her 10th name day, claimed she wanted to know about her future husband, about the king she would marry and the crown she would wear. But the truth, as it so often does with the Lannisters, ran deeper and darker than mere curiosity about romance and royal titles. Even as a child, Cersei was consumed by the need to control her destiny, to bend the world to her will through sheer force of personality and the considerable power of her family name. She had already begun to understand that in the Game of Thrones, knowledge was not just power, it was survival itself. The prophecy she received that night would become both her greatest weapon and her ultimate downfall, a double-edged sword that would cut down her enemies while slowly bleeding her of the very humanity that might have saved her. Maggie the Frog, that mysterious witch whose true name and origins remain shrouded in the mists of Westerosi history, spoke 3 prophecies that night, each one more terrifying than the last. The first concerned Cersei's marriage and queenship, promising her a crown and a king with 20 children while she would have only 3. The second prophecy dealt with the deaths of those 3 children, each one's passing marking another step towards Cersei's inevitable destruction. But it was the third prophecy, the Valonqar prophecy, that would prove to be the most complex and enduring mystery of Martin's entire saga. And when your tears have drowned you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands about your pale white throat and choke the life from you. The words themselves seem simple enough, almost crude in their directness. But in a world where High Valyrian terms carry multiple meanings and prophecies are notorious for their symbolic rather than literal interpretations, these words have spawned countless theories, debates, and scholarly analyses that continue to evolve with each new book. Each new revelation about the complex relationships between the major houses of Westeros. The word Valonqar itself is High Valyrian for little brother. But even this seemingly straightforward translation opens up a universe of possibilities. In the world of Game of Thrones, where bastards can become kings and younger siblings often outlive their elders through cunning or luck, the concept of a little brother extends far beyond simple birth order. It encompasses everything from literally younger brothers to younger siblings of any gender, to members of younger branches of family trees, to those who hold lesser positions within various organizations or societies. The most obvious candidate, and the one that Cersei herself has long assumed to be her destined killer, is Tyrion Lannister, the dwarf brother she has despised since the moment of his birth. From Cersei's perspective, Tyrion represents everything wrong with her family and her world. He is physically imperfect in a society that values beauty and strength, intellectually superior in ways that threaten her own sense of impotence, and possessed of a moral compass that stands in stark contrast to her own ruthless pragmatism. More than that, Tyrion's very existence reminds Cersei daily of the prophecy that haunts her dreams, making him both the symbol of her greatest fear and the target of her most concentrated hatred. The case for Tyrion, as the Valonqar rests on more than just birth order and Cersei's own paranoia. Throughout the series, Tyrion has demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking and political acumen that would be necessary to outmaneuver someone as cunning and well protected as the Queen Regent. His knowledge of the secret passages within the Red Keep, his network of contacts throughout King's Landing, and his intimate understanding of Cersei's psychological weaknesses make him uniquely positioned to fulfill the prophecy in a way that would be both personally satisfying and poetically just. Moreover, Tyrion's character arc throughout the series has been building toward exactly this kind of confrontation with his sister. From their childhood antagonism through their adult political conflicts, every interaction between Tyrion and Cersei has been charged with the electricity of impending violence. Tyrion's trial for Joffrey's murder, his escape from King's Landing, and his subsequent alliance with Daenerys Targaryen have all served to position him as Cersei's most dangerous enemy, the one person who knows her well enough to exploit her weaknesses and has sufficient motivation to see her destroyed. The symbolic appropriateness of Tyrion as the Valonqar cannot be overstated. In a series that consistently subverts traditional fantasy tropes, having the physically smallest and most underestimated member of House Lannister ultimately bring down its most powerful representative would represent the perfect embodiment of Martin's recurring theme that intelligence and determination can triumph over brute force and political position. Tyrion strangling Cersei would not just fulfill a prophecy, it would serve as the ultimate vindication of everyone who has ever been dismissed, underestimated, or abused by those in power. But the case for Tyrion, compelling as it may be, is far from the only viable interpretation of the Valonqar prophecy. In fact, some of the most intriguing theories surrounding Cersei's eventual demise focus on candidates who seem far less obvious but whose claims to the title, Little Brother, reveal themselves through careful analysis of family relationships. birth orders, and the complex web of alliances and enmities that define the political landscape of Westeros. Perhaps the most emotionally devastating possibility is that Jaime Lannister, Cersei's twin brother and lifelong lover, will ultimately be the one to fulfill the prophecy. While Jaime and Cersei are twins, Jaime was born second, technically making him Cersei's younger brother by a matter of minutes. This small detail, easily overlooked in the context of their unusual relationship, could prove to be the key to understanding the true meaning of the prophecy. The idea of Jaime, as the Valonqar, carries with it a tragic poetry that would be entirely consistent with Martin's approach to storytelling. Throughout the series, Jaime and Cersei's relationship has been the twisted heart of the Lannister family's dysfunction. A love affair that has produced 3 illegitimate children, sparked a war that has killed thousands and corrupted both participants in ways that have made them increasingly isolated from the rest of humanity. For this relationship to end with Jaime killing Cersei would represent the ultimate expression of how love can transform into its opposite when poisoned by secrets, lies, and the corrupting influence of power. Jaime's character development throughout the series has been moving him steadily away from Cersei's influence and toward a more independent moral stance. His relationship with Brienne of Tarth, his growing discomfort with Cersei's increasingly erratic behavior, and his gradual recognition of the costs of their lifelong deception have all served to create distance between the twins that once seemed inseparable. If this trajectory continues, it's entirely possible that Jaime will eventually reach a point where he sees Cersei not as his beloved sister and lover, but as a threat to everything and everyone he has come to care about. The mechanics of how Jaime might fulfill the Valonqar prophecy are particularly intriguing to consider. Unlike Tyrion, who would need to overcome significant physical and logistical challenges to get close enough to Cersei to strangle her, Jaime has constant access to his twin sister. He shares her bed, her secrets, and her trust in ways that would make him the perfect assassin if he ever decided that Cersei needed to die for the greater good. The image of Jaime wrapping his golden hand around Cersei's throat, the same hand that killed the Mad King to save King's Landing from wildfire, carries with it a symmetry that would be deeply satisfying from a narrative perspective. Furthermore, Jaime's experience as a Kingslayer provides him with both the psychological framework and the practical knowledge necessary to kill someone he once loved in the name of protecting innocent lives. If Cersei's descent into madness continues to the point where she becomes a threat comparable to Aerys Targaryen, Jaime might find himself in the position of having to make the same terrible choice he made years ago in the throne room of the Red Keep. The parallel between killing the Mad King and killing the Mad Queen would be too perfect for Martin to resist, but the emotional devastation of the scenario extends beyond just Jaime and Cersei. The prophecy specifically mentions that Cersei will be drowned in her own tears before the Valonqar kills her, suggesting that she will experience some profound grief or loss immediately before her death. If Jaime is indeed the Valonqar, what could possibly make Cersei weep so bitterly that she would be drowned in her tears? The most likely answer is that she would be crying over the loss of Jaime himself, not his physical death, but the death of their relationship, the final recognition that the man she has loved most in the world no longer loves her in return. The scene writes itself with heartbreaking clarity. Cersei, finally understanding that Jaime has turned against her, that their love has curdled into something toxic and destructive, weeping uncontrollably as she realizes that she has lost the one person who truly mattered to her. And Jaime, seeing what his sister has become, what their relationship has cost the world, making the decision to end both Cersei's suffering and the threat she represents to everyone else. It would be murder as mercy, betrayal as the ultimate act of love, the final gift that Jaime could give to the woman who destroyed them both. Yet even as the cases for Tyrion and Jaime represent the most straightforward interpretations of the Valonqar prophecy, They are far from the only possibilities that emerge when we begin to examine the broader cast of characters who might qualify as little brothers in the complex world of Westerosi politics and genealogy. Some of the most compelling theories about the prophecy's fulfillment center on characters whose connections to the title, Valonqar, are less obvious but potentially more significant from a thematic perspective. One of the most intriguing alternative candidates is Arya Stark, whose claim to being a little brother rests not on her actual gender or birth order, but on her assumed identity as a faceless man and her history of disguising herself as a boy. Throughout her journey from King's Landing to Braavos and back, Arya has repeatedly taken on male identities, most notably as Aerie during her time with the Knights, Watch recruits, and as various personas during her training with the House of Black and White. If the prophecy is to be interpreted symbolically rather than literally, Arya's ability to become anyone, including a little brother, makes her a viable candidate for the role of Valonqar. The thematic appropriateness of Arya as Cersei's killer is undeniable. From the moment Cersei ordered the arrest of Ned Stark, setting in motion the events that would scatter the Stark children to the winds and ultimately lead to their father's execution, Arya has had every reason to hate the Queen Regent with a passion that burns as hot as wildfire. Cersei represents everything that destroyed Arya's family, everything that stole her childhood and forced her to become a killer in order to survive. For Arya to be the one to finally end Cersei's reign of terror would represent a perfect circle of justice, the restoration of balance in a world that has been tilted toward cruelty and corruption for far too long. Moreover, Arya's training as a faceless man has given her exactly the skills necessary to infiltrate Cersei's defenses and get close enough to fulfill the prophecy. Her ability to change faces, to become anyone she chooses, would allow her to bypass even the most sophisticated security measures. She could appear as a servant, a guard, a lord, or even someone Cersei trusts completely. The Queen would never see her death coming until it was too late to prevent it. The prophecy's specific mention of hands around Cersei's throat also fits with Arya's preferred methods of killing. Throughout the series, Arya has shown a preference for personal, intimate methods of murder that allow her to look her victims in the eyes as they die. She has used knives, poison, and her bare hands to kill those on her list, always ensuring that her targets know exactly who is killing them and why. Strangling Cersei would be entirely consistent with this pattern, and the personal nature of the act would provide the emotional satisfaction that Arya has been seeking since her father's death. But perhaps the most compelling aspect of Arya as the Valonqar is the way it would subvert expectations while still fulfilling the technical requirements of the prophecy. In a series known for its shocking twists and unexpected revelations, having Cersei's death come at the hands of a Stark daughter disguised as a little brother would be exactly the kind of misdirection that Martin excels at. It would satisfy the prophecy's literal requirements while delivering an emotional payoff that goes far beyond simple revenge. The case for Arya is further strengthened by the fact that she is already on her way to King's Landing with a specific mission to kill Cersei. Her inclusion of the Queen Regent on her infamous list of people who must die is not a casual threat or a child's fantasy of revenge. It is a sacred vow that Arya has carried with her through years of training and hardship. Every skill she has learned, every identity she has assumed, every moral compromise she has made has been in service of this ultimate goal. For the prophecy to be fulfilled by anyone other than Arya would almost seem like a betrayal of her character, arc, and the journey she has been on since the very beginning of the series. Yet even Arya's compelling candidacy for the role of Valonqar pales in comparison to some of the more unexpected theories that have emerged from careful analysis of the prophecy's wording and the complex family relationships that define the world of Westeros. One of the most surprising and potentially game-changing interpretations centers on Jon Snow, whose claim to being a little brother depends entirely on revelations about his true parentage that have only recently come to light. If Jon Snow is indeed the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, as the series strongly suggests, then his relationship to various other characters becomes far more complex than it initially appeared. Most significantly, if Rhaegar was older than his siblings Viserys and Daenerys, then Jon would be their nephew but could still be considered a little brother in the context of the Targaryen family line. More intriguingly, if Jon's true parentage is revealed and he is accepted as a legitimate Targaryen, he could be seen as a little brother to anyone who has a claim to the Iron Throne. Based on conquest rather than blood death, the idea of Jon Snow as the Valonqar introduces a fascinating dynamic to the prophecy, because it would mean that Cersei's death comes not from within her own family, but from the very bloodline she has spent years trying to eliminate. The Targaryens represent everything that the Lannisters displaced when Robert Baratheon won his rebellion, and Cersei has consistently viewed any surviving members of the Dragon King's dynasty as existential threats to her family's power. For her to die at the hands of a secret Targaryen would be the ultimate irony, a final victory for the family she thought she had helped to destroy. Jon's character and moral code also make him a compelling candidate for the role of Valonqar, but in a way that differs significantly from the revenge-driven motivations that might drive Tyrion, Jaime, or Arya. Jon has consistently been portrayed as someone who kills only when necessary, who takes no pleasure in violence, and who carries the burden of every life he takes. If Jon were to kill Cersei, it would not be out of personal hatred or a desire for revenge, but because he genuinely believed it was necessary to protect innocent people or to prevent some greater catastrophe. This interpretation gains additional weight when we consider the prophecy's mention of Cersei being drowned in tears before her death. What could make Cersei weep so bitterly? Perhaps the revelation that Jon Snow, the bastard she dismissed as irrelevant to the Game of Thrones, is actually the legitimate heir to the Iron Throne, making her entire reign and everything she has done to maintain her power ultimately meaningless. The realization that she has been fighting the wrong war, protecting herself from the wrong threats, could indeed reduce her to the kind of tears that the prophecy describes. But the Jon Snow theory, compelling as it may be, requires a level of revelation and character development that may not occur within the remaining books of the series. For Jon to fulfill the Valonqar prophecy, he would need to not only discover his true parentage, but also find himself in a position where killing Cersei becomes necessary and possible. Given the complex political situation in Westeros and Jon's current obligations beyond the Wall, this scenario would require significant plot developments that may not align with Martin's planned conclusion to the series. Perhaps more realistic, but equally unexpected, is the possibility that the Valonqar prophecy will be fulfilled by Sandor Clegane, the Hound, whose claim to being a little brother is both literal and deeply personal. Sandor is the younger brother of Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, and his entire character arc has been defined by living in his older brother's shadow and dealing with the physical and psychological scars that Gregor inflicted on him during their childhood. If anyone in the series embodies the concept of a little brother in all its complexity, the resentment, the competition, the desperate desire to prove oneself worthy, it is Sandor Clegane. The Hound's relationship with Cersei has been one of the most interesting undercurrents throughout the series. As a member of the Kingsguard and later as Joffrey's personal bodyguard, Sandor has had ample opportunity to observe Cersei's true nature, to see behind the mask of royal dignity, to the petty, cruel, paranoid woman beneath. He has witnessed her treatment of her children, her manipulation of those around her, and her willingness to sacrifice anyone and anything to maintain her grip on power. If anyone has reason to view Cersei as a threat that needs to be eliminated, it is someone who has seen her at her worst while being powerless to do anything about it. Moreover, Sandor's current spiritual journey and his gradual redemption through his relationship with the faith add an interesting dimension to the possibility. of him fulfilling the Valonqar prophecy. If Sandor has indeed found some measure of peace and purpose through his work with the elder brother, he might see killing Cersei not as an act of personal revenge, but as a necessary service to the realm, a way of protecting innocent people from a ruler who has proven herself to be as dangerous and unpredictable as his own brother. The mechanics of how Sandor might gain access to Cersei are also worth considering. As a former member of the royal household, he knows the layout of the Red Keep, the routines of the guards, and the various ways that someone could gain entry to the Queen's private chambers. His presumed death at the hands of Brienne of Tarth would make him the perfect assassin, someone who could move freely because everyone believes he is already dead. The shock of seeing the Hound alive would be enough to paralyze Cersei with fear, giving him the opportunity he would need to fulfill the prophecy. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Sandor as the Valonqar is the way it would tie together several of the series' major themes. The Hound has always been a character caught between brutality and tenderness, between his loyalty to the Lannisters and his growing disgust with their methods. For him to be the instrument of Cersei's downfall would represent the ultimate triumph of conscience over obligation, of moral clarity over political expedience. It would also serve as a final repudiation of everything that Gregor Clegane represents: the use of violence for its own sake, the bullying of those weaker than oneself, the complete absence of mercy or compassion. Yet even as we explore these various candidates for the role of Valonqar, we must also consider the possibility that the prophecy's fulfillment will be far more complex and unexpected than any single theory suggests. George R.R. Martin has consistently demonstrated a preference for prophecies that come true in ways that no one anticipates, and the Valonqar prophecy may be no exception to this pattern. One particularly intriguing possibility is that the prophecy will be fulfilled collectively rather than individually, that multiple little brothers will play a role in bringing about Cersei's downfall. This interpretation gains credibility when we consider that many of the most significant events in the series have resulted from the convergence of multiple plot lines and the combined actions of several characters, rather than the heroic efforts of any single individual. Imagine a scenario where Tyrion provides the strategic planning necessary to breach Cersei's defenses. Jaime provides the access and inside knowledge required to reach her. Arya provides the skills and determination needed to carry out the actual killing. And Jon Snow provides the political legitimacy necessary to justify the act to the realm at large. Each of these characters could be seen as fulfilling a different aspect of the little brother role, and their combined efforts could satisfy the prophecy in a way that no single assassin could accomplish alone. This collective interpretation of the Valonqar prophecy would be entirely consistent with Martin's approach to storytelling throughout the series. Just as the War of the Five Kings was not won by any single battle or commander, but by the accumulated effects of dozens of smaller conflicts and political maneuverings, Cersei's downfall might result from the convergence of multiple threats and the combined determination of everyone she has wronged over the years. The prophecy's reference to Cersei being drowned in tears before her death also supports this collective interpretation. What could reduce the proud and defiant Queen Regent to such depths of despair? Perhaps the realization that she is completely alone, that every alliance she thought she could count on has crumbled, that every person she believed she could manipulate or control has turned against her. The tears that drown her might not be grief for any single loss, but the overwhelming recognition that her entire world has collapsed around her and that she has no one left to blame but herself. Another possibility that deserves serious consideration is that the Valonqar prophecy will be subverted entirely, that Cersei's death will come in a way that technically fulfills the prophecy's requirements while completely undermining its apparent meaning. This kind of prophetic misdirection is a hallmark of Martin's writing, and the Valonqar prophecy would be the perfect vehicle for one final twist that recontextualizes everything we thought we knew about Cersei's fate. For example, what if the little brother who kills Cersei is not a person at all, but a metaphorical reference to something else entirely? In the complex symbolic language of prophecy, little brother could refer to a younger sibling organization, a junior member of a guild or order, or even a smaller version of something larger and more threatening. The hands that wrap around. Cersei's throat might not be human hands at all, but the metaphorical hands of justice, fate, or divine retribution. This interpretation might seem far-fetched, but it becomes more plausible when we consider some of the other prophecies in Martin's work and the creative ways they have been fulfilled. The prophecy of the prince that was promised, for instance, has been interpreted to refer to multiple characters simultaneously, and its fulfillment may depend more on symbolic resonance than literal accuracy. The Valonqar prophecy could operate according to similar principles, with its ultimate meaning becoming clear only in retrospect. One specific scenario that embodies this kind of subversion involves the possibility that Cersei will be killed by wildfire, the same substance that she has used as a weapon throughout the series. Wildfire is often referred to as the little brother of dragonfire, being a man-made attempt to replicate the devastating power of dragon flames. If Cersei dies in a wildfire explosion, either one that she sets herself or one that is triggered by her enemies, the prophecy could be technically fulfilled while delivering a death that is both ironic and thematically appropriate. The image of Cersei being consumed by the very weapon she has used to terrorize her enemies would serve as a perfect example of Martin's approach to poetic justice. Throughout the series, Cersei has shown a dangerous fascination with wildfire, using it to destroy the Sept of Baelor and everyone inside it, and threatening to use it again whenever she feels cornered or desperate. For her to ultimately become a victim of her own preferred weapon would be the kind of ironic reversal that readers have come to expect from the series. Moreover, the prophecy's reference to hands around Cersei's throat could be interpreted metaphorically as the hands of the wildfire itself, the green flames that would wrap around her and choke the life from her lungs. This interpretation would satisfy the prophecy's literal requirements, while delivering a death that is both spectacular and symbolically meaningful. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the wildfire theory is the way it would tie together several of the series' major plot threads. If Cersei dies in a wildfire explosion, it would likely occur during some kind of final confrontation in King's Landing, possibly as part of the prophesied second dance of dragons or the long-awaited clash between ice and fire. Her death would not be an isolated event, but part of a larger catastrophe that reshapes the entire political landscape of Westeros. This brings us to another crucial aspect of the Valonqar prophecy that is often overlooked in discussions of who might kill Cersei, the question of when and where her death will occur. The prophecy provides few clues about the circumstances surrounding Cersei's demise, but the broader context of the series suggests that her death will come at a moment of maximum dramatic impact, probably as part of the climactic events that bring the entire saga to its conclusion. If we accept that Cersei's death will occur during the series' final act, then we must consider how the various candidates for the role of Valonqar will be positioned at that crucial moment. Will Tyrion be in King's Landing, or will he still be serving Daenerys Targaryen across the Narrow Sea? Will Jaime still be loyal to his sister, or will his character development have taken him so far from his original path that killing Cersei becomes not just possible but inevitable? Will Arya have completed her training with the Faceless Men and returned to Westeros with the skills necessary to infiltrate the Red Keep? The timing of the prophecy's fulfillment also raises questions about its relationship to the other major plot threads that are converging as the series approaches its conclusion. The return of the others, the invasion of Daenerys and her dragons, the revelation of Jon Snow's true parentage, and the various political machinations that continue to unfold throughout the Seven Kingdoms all have the potential to influence when and how Cersei meets her end. One particularly intriguing possibility is that Cersei's death will occur not as an isolated act of revenge or justice, but as part of a larger pattern of deaths that fulfill multiple prophecies simultaneously. Just as the Red Wedding satisfied the narrative requirements of several different character arcs while advancing multiple plot lines, Cersei's death might serve to resolve numerous conflicts and prophecies at once. For instance, if Jaime is indeed the Valonqar, his killing of Cersei might occur at the same moment that he fulfills some other prophetic role, perhaps as the prince that was promised, or as the hero who saves King's Landing from a second wildfire catastrophe. The convergence of multiple prophecies in a single climactic moment would be entirely consistent with Martin's approach to plotting, and it would ensure that Cersei's death carries maximum emotional and thematic weight. This convergence theory gains additional credibility when we consider the various ways that the major characters' story arcs are beginning to intersect as the series progresses. Tyrion's alliance with Daenerys puts him on a collision course with his family's interests. Jaime's growing discomfort with Cersei's methods sets up an inevitable confrontation between the twins. Arya's list of targets draws her inexorably toward King's Landing, and a final reckoning with those who destroyed her family. Jon Snow's true parentage creates new alliances and enmities that will reshape the political landscape of Westeros. All of these individual journeys are converging on the same point, the ultimate confrontation between the various claimants to power in Westeros and the resolution of the conflicts that have been building since the very beginning of the series. Cersei's death will not occur in isolation, but as part of this larger convergence, and the identity of her killer will be determined not just by the requirements of the prophecy, but by the complex web of relationships and obligations that define each character's position at that crucial moment. This brings us to one of the most important questions surrounding the Valonqar prophecy: whether its fulfillment will bring justice or simply perpetuate the cycle of violence that has defined the series from the beginning. Throughout Game of Thrones, Martin has consistently explored the idea that revenge, no matter how justified it might seem, often creates more problems than it solves. The deaths of tyrants and villains rarely bring the peace and closure that their victims hope for, and the act of killing, even when morally justified, leaves permanent scars on those who commit it. If Tyrion kills Cersei, will it bring him the satisfaction he has been seeking since childhood? Or will it simply make him another kinslayer, another member of his family destroyed by hatred and violence? If Jaime fulfills the prophecy, will it represent his final redemption or his ultimate damnation? If Arya is the Valonqar, will crossing Cersei's name off her list finally allow her to reclaim her humanity? Or will it complete her transformation into a creature of vengeance who can never return to the innocent girl she once was? These questions go to the heart of what makes Game of Thrones such a compelling and morally complex series. The Valonqar prophecy is not just about identifying Cersei's killer, it's about understanding what that killing will mean for the killer, for the realm, and for the broader themes that Martin has been exploring throughout his epic tale. The identity of the Valonqar matters not just because it will determine how one of the series' most important characters dies, but because it will reveal something fundamental about the nature of justice, revenge, and redemption in a world where moral absolutes are rare and every victory comes at a terrible cost. This moral complexity is perhaps best illustrated by considering what each of the major candidates for the role of Valonqar would represent thematically. Tyrion as the killer would embody the triumph of the underestimated and despised, but it would also represent the victory of intellect over emotion, calculation over passion. His killing of Cersei would be rational, planned, and effective, but it might lack the emotional catharsis that readers expect from such a significant moment. Jaime as the Valonqar would represent something entirely different, the ultimate expression of love twisted into its opposite, the recognition that sometimes destroying what you love is the only way to save it. His killing of Cersei would be deeply personal and emotionally devastating, but it would also carry with it the weight of their entire shared history and the complex dynamics of their relationship. Arya as the killer would embody the theme of justice delayed but not denied. The idea that those who commit terrible acts will eventually face consequences for their choices. Her killing of Cersei would be satisfying from a narrative perspective, but it would also raise questions about whether the pursuit of justice can go too far, whether the desire for revenge can consume those who pursue it until they become as dangerous as their enemies. The collective interpretation of the prophecy would represent something different again. The idea that some evils are so great that they can only be defeated through the combined efforts of many people. That justice is not the responsibility of any single individual, but of society as a whole. This interpretation would emphasize the communal nature of both crime and punishment, suggesting that Cersei's reign of terror has harmed so many people that her downfall requires the participation of all those she has wronged. Each of these thematic interpretations carries with it different implications for how the series will ultimately conclude and what message Martin intends to convey about the nature of power, justice, and human nature. The choice of which character fulfills the Valonqar prophecy will not be arbitrary. It will reflect Martin's final judgment on these fundamental questions and his vision of what kind of resolution is most appropriate for the story he has been telling. But beyond the thematic implications of the prophecy's fulfillment, there are also practical considerations that may influence how Martin chooses to resolve this crucial plot point. The Valonqar prophecy has become one of the most discussed and anticipated elements of the entire series, with millions of readers and viewers eagerly awaiting its resolution. This level of attention creates both opportunities and challenges. For the author, on one hand, the widespread interest in the prophecy ensures that its fulfillment will have maximum impact when it finally occurs. Readers who have been theorizing about the identity of the Valonqar for years will experience a powerful sense of catharsis when the mystery is finally solved, especially if the resolution manages to surprise them while still feeling inevitable. In retrospect, on the other hand, the intense scrutiny that the prophecy has received means that virtually every plausible interpretation has been analyzed and discussed extensively online. This makes it extremely difficult for Martin to deliver a resolution that will surprise dedicated fans while still satisfying the narrative requirements of the story. The author must find a way to fulfill the prophecy that feels both unexpected and inevitable, original, and true to the established patterns of the series. This challenge is compounded by the fact that the Valonqar prophecy is just one of many plot threads that Martin must resolve in the remaining books of the series. The identity of Cersei's killer must be determined not just by the internal logic of the prophecy itself, but by how that revelation fits into the broader narrative structure of the series' conclusion. The author cannot simply choose the most dramatically satisfying candidate for the role of Valonqar. He must choose the one whose actions best serve the story's overall trajectory. This constraint becomes particularly important when we consider the various ways that the prophecy's fulfillment might interact with other major plot developments. If Daenerys Targaryen's invasion of Westeros occurs simultaneously with the other's assault from the north, Cersei's death might need to occur at a specific moment that allows for maximum dramatic impact without disrupting the pacing of these other crucial events. The identity of the Valonqar might be determined as much by logistics and timing as by thematic appropriateness. Similarly, the prophecy's fulfillment must take into account the various character arcs that are still in progress. If Tyrion is to be the Valonqar, his character development must reach a point where killing his sister becomes both psychologically possible and morally justifiable. If Jaime is the destined killer, his relationship with Cersei must deteriorate to the point where love transforms into deadly opposition. If Arya is to fulfill the prophecy, her training and journey must bring her to the right place at the right time with the necessary skills and motivation. These practical considerations suggest that the identity of the Valonqar may be determined not by abstract thematic concerns, but by the concrete requirements of plot progression and character development. The candidate who can most naturally and convincingly reach the position where killing Cersei becomes both possible and necessary may be the one who ultimately fulfills the prophecy, regardless of how obvious or surprising that choice might be. To readers, this pragmatic approach to resolving the prophecy would be entirely consistent with Martin's writing style throughout the series. While the author clearly enjoys surprising his readers with unexpected plot developments, he has always prioritized narrative coherence and character consistency over shock value. The Valonqar prophecy will be fulfilled in whatever way best serves the story's overall integrity, even if that means choosing a less surprising candidate for the role of Cersei's killer. But perhaps the most important factor in determining the prophecy's fulfillment is the question of what Martin wants to say about Cersei's self as a character. Throughout the series, Cersei has been portrayed as both a villain and a victim, a monster and a mother, a cunning political operator and a paranoid fool. The way she dies and who kills her will serve as Martin's final statement about her character and the role she has played in the larger story. If Cersei is killed by Tyrion, it suggests that she was ultimately undone by her own cruelty and short-sightedness, that her inability to see past her prejudices and recognize her brother's worth led directly to her downfall. This interpretation would cast Cersei as a tragic figure whose fate was sealed by her own character flaws rather than by external circumstances. If Jaime is the one who kills her, it implies that Cersei's greatest weakness was her inability to grow and change, her refusal to abandon the destructive patterns that define their relationship from childhood. This reading would emphasize the theme of personal responsibility and the idea that people must be held accountable for their choices, even by those who love them most. If Arya fulfills the prophecy, it suggests that Cersei's primary failing was her treatment of the Stark family and her role in the destruction of the Old Order. This interpretation would cast her death as a form of cosmic justice, the restoration of balance after years of chaos and injustice. The collective interpretation would imply that Cersei's greatest sin was her impact on the realm as a whole, her contribution to the suffering and instability that has plagued Westeros throughout the series. Her death would represent not personal revenge but societal correction, the elimination of a cancer that has been poisoning the body politic. Each of these interpretations reflects a different understanding of Cersei's role in the series and a different judgment about what she represents. The choice of which interpretation to embrace will reveal something fundamental about Martin's vision of justice, responsibility, and human nature. But regardless of who ultimately fulfills the Valonqar prophecy, the mystery surrounding it has already served an important function in the series by highlighting the complex relationships between prophecy, free will, and destiny. Throughout Game of Thrones, characters have struggled with the question of whether their fates are predetermined or whether they have the power to shape their own destinies through their choices and actions. Cersei's relationship with the Valonqar prophecy exemplifies this struggle. Her knowledge of the prophecy has shaped her actions throughout the series, leading her to make choices that may have actually brought about the very fate she was trying to avoid. Her treatment of Tyrion, her manipulation of Jaime, her paranoia about potential threats, all of these behaviors can be traced back to her fear of the prophecy's fulfillment. This creates a fascinating paradox. If Cersei had never heard the prophecy, would she have acted differently toward her brothers? Would she have been kinder to Tyrion, less possessive of Jaime, more trusting of those around her? And if she had behaved differently, would the prophecy still have come to pass? Or would her different choices have created a different future entirely? The answer to these questions goes to the heart of how prophecy functions in Martin's fictional universe. The series suggests that prophecies are not simple predictions of inevitable futures, but complex interactions between fate and free will, destiny and choice. Prophecies come true not despite the actions of those who hear them, but because of those actions. They are self-fulfilling not because they override human agency, but because they become part of the web of motivations and fears that drive human behavior. This understanding of prophecy adds another layer of complexity to the question of who will fulfill the Valonqar prophecy. The identity of Cersei's killer may be determined not just by the prophecy itself, but by how Cersei's knowledge of the prophecy has shaped her relationships with the various candidates. Her treatment of each potential Valonqar may be the very thing that creates the conditions necessary for the prophecy's fulfillment. Consider how Cersei's fear of Tyrion has led her to treat him with consistent cruelty and suspicion throughout his life. This treatment has created resentment and hatred that could easily motivate Tyrion to kill his sister if the opportunity arose. In this sense, Cersei's belief in the prophecy may be actively bringing about its fulfillment by creating the very conditions that make Tyrion's transformation into the Valonqar possible. Similarly, Cersei's possessiveness toward Jaime and her refusal to allow their relationship to evolve has created tensions that could eventually lead to a violent confrontation between the twins. Her fear of losing Jaime's loyalty may cause her to act in ways that ultimately drive him away, creating the emotional distance necessary for him to see her as an enemy rather than a lover. Even with candidates like Arya or Jon Snow, who have no direct knowledge of the prophecy, Cersei's actions may be creating the conditions for its fulfillment. Her role in the destruction of the Stark family has given Arya every reason to want her dead, while her illegitimate claim to the throne creates a natural conflict with Jon's superior birthright. This self-fulfilling aspect of the prophecy suggests that the identity of the Valonqar may be less important than the process by which the prophecy brings about its own fulfillment. The mystery is not just who will kill Cersei, but how the prophecy itself will shape the events that lead to her death. This metatextual dimension of the Valonqar prophecy reflects Martin's sophisticated understanding of how prophecy functions in literature and mythology. Rather than using prophecy as a simple plot device to create suspense or provide exposition, Martin has created a complex system where prophecies are active participants in the narratives they describe. They don't just predict the future, they help to create it through their influence on the characters who hear them. This approach to prophecy is particularly effective in a series like Game of Thrones, where the complexity of character relationships and political dynamics creates numerous opportunities for prophecies to influence events in unexpected ways. The Valonqar prophecy doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a larger web of predictions, fears, ambitions, and relationships that define the world of Westeros. The prophecy's fulfillment will therefore be determined not just by the literal meaning of its words, but by how those words have shaped the behavior of everyone who has heard them or been affected by them. Cersei's death will be the culmination of a process that began the moment she first learned of the prophecy, a process that has been unfolding through every choice she has made and every relationship she has damaged in her desperate attempt to avoid her predicted fate. This understanding of the prophecy's function also helps to explain why Martin has been so careful not to reveal its ultimate meaning too early in the series. The mystery of the Valonqar's identity is not just a puzzle for readers to solve. It's a crucial element of the story's structure, a question that must remain unanswered until the very moment of its resolution in order to maintain the complex balance between fate and free will that defines the series. The prophecy's eventual fulfillment will therefore serve multiple functions simultaneously. It will provide closure for Cersei's character arc and resolution for one of the series' most enduring mysteries. It will deliver emotional catharsis for readers who have been waiting to see justice done. and it will serve as a final demonstration of how prophecy, free will, and human nature interact in Martin's fictional universe. But perhaps most importantly, the resolution of the Valonqar prophecy will provide a crucial piece of the puzzle that is the series' overall theme. Game of Thrones is ultimately a story about power, how it is acquired, how it is maintained, how it corrupts those who possess it, and how it is ultimately lost. Cersei's death will represent the final judgment on her use of power and the consequences of her choices. The identity of her killer will therefore be significant, not just for what it reveals about the prophecy itself, but for what it says about the nature of justice in Martin's world. Will Cersei be killed by someone she wronged, representing the triumph of justice over tyranny? Will she be killed by someone she loved, representing the self-destructive nature of power? Will she be killed by someone she never suspected, representing the unpredictable nature of fate? The answer to these questions will help to determine the series' ultimate message about power, justice, and human nature. It will reveal whether Martin believes that tyrants always face justice in the end, or whether the powerful can sometimes escape the consequences of their actions. It will show whether love and family loyalty can overcome political necessity, or whether the demands of power ultimately corrupt all relationships. These are the stakes that make the Valonqar prophecy so much more than a simple whodunit. Identity of Cersei's killer will serve as a lens through which we can understand the entire series and its complex exploration of morality, power, and human nature. It will be both the resolution of a specific mystery and the key to understanding the broader themes that have driven the narrative from the very beginning. As we approach the series' conclusion, the question of who will fulfill the Valonqar prophecy becomes increasingly urgent. The various candidates have been positioned throughout the story, their motivations established, their capabilities demonstrated. The stage has been set for the prophecy's fulfillment, and the only question remaining is which of the potential Valonqars will ultimately step forward to claim their destiny. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of this mystery is the possibility that the prophecy's fulfillment will surprise even the most dedicated readers and theorists. Martin has consistently demonstrated an ability to resolve complex plot threads in ways that are both unexpected and inevitable, and the Valonqar prophecy may be the ultimate test of his skill in this regard. The prophecy has been discussed and analyzed so extensively that it seems impossible for Martin to deliver a resolution that will truly surprise his audience. Every viable candidate has been identified. Every possible interpretation has been explored. Every potential twist has been anticipated. And yet, the author's track record suggests that he will find a way to subvert expectations while still satisfying the narrative requirements of the story. This raises the fascinating possibility that the true identity of the Valonqar has been hiding in plain sight all along, disguised by our assumptions about what the prophecy means and who it could refer to. Perhaps the solution to the mystery requires us to look beyond the obvious candidates and consider characters or interpretations that seem impossible at first glance, but reveal themselves to be inevitable upon closer examination. Or perhaps the prophecy's fulfillment will require us to reconsider what we think we know about the characters themselves. The Valonqar might be someone who has been present throughout the series, but whose true nature or motivations have been concealed until the crucial moment of revelation. The prophecy's resolution might force us to reinterpret everything we thought we understood about the relationships between the major characters. This element of uncertainty is what makes the Valonqar prophecy so compelling and enduring. It's not just a puzzle to be solved, but a mystery that challenges our understanding of the entire series. The prophecy's fulfillment will be both an ending and a beginning, the resolution of one mystery and the revelation of truths that recontextualize everything that came before. The question of who will kill Cersei Lannister has become one of the defining mysteries of modern fantasy literature. a puzzle that has engaged millions of readers and spawned countless theories and debates. But the true significance of the Valonqar prophecy extends far beyond the simple question of identity. It represents the culmination of themes that have been developing throughout the series, the final test of characters who have been shaped by years of conflict and growth, and the ultimate expression of Martin's vision of how fate, free will, and human nature interact in a complex and morally ambiguous world. When the prophecy is finally fulfilled, it will mark not just the death of one of the series' most complex and controversial characters, but the resolution of questions that have been at the heart of the entire narrative. The identity of the Valonqar will reveal what Martin believes about justice, power, family, and the nature of prophecy itself. It will serve as both a climactic moment of action and a profound statement about the human condition. Until that moment arrives, the mystery of the Valonqar remains one of the most fascinating and debated aspects of Game of Thrones. It represents everything that makes Martin's series so compelling: the complex character relationships, the intricate plotting, the moral ambiguity, and the constant tension between fate and free will. The prophecy embodies the series' central themes while providing a focal point for readers' hopes, fears, and expectations about how the story will ultimately conclude. Whether the Valonqar proves to be Tyrion, Jon, Arya, Jon Snow, Sandor Clegane, or someone else entirely, the prophecy's fulfillment will represent a crucial moment in the series' exploration of how the past shapes the present, how choices create consequences, and how even the most powerful individuals must ultimately face the results of their actions. The hands that wrap around Cersei's pale white throat will be doing more than ending a life. They will be bringing justice, delivering judgment, and closing a chapter in the long and bloody history of a bully Westeros. In the end, the Valonqar prophecy is about more than death. It's about accountability, consequence, and the inescapable nature of truth. It's about the idea that no one, no matter how powerful or protected, can escape the results of their choices forever. It's about the power of words, both spoken and unspoken, to shape reality and determine destiny. And it's about the complex web of relationships that bind us all together, making us simultaneously victims and perpetrators, heroes and villains, brothers and enemies. The mystery of who will kill Cersei Lannister may be resolved in the pages of a book, but its implications will resonate far beyond the boundaries of any single story. It will stand as a testament to the power of prophecy, the complexity of human nature, and the eternal struggle between those who seek to control their destiny and those who are willing to accept whatever fate brings them. When the Valonqar finally reveals themselves, when the pale white throat is finally encircled by the prophesied hands, it will mark the end of one of literature's most compelling mysteries and the beginning of our understanding of what it all meant. Until then, we can only speculate, theorize, and wait for the moment when prophecy becomes reality and the true identity of the little brother is finally revealed. The Game of Thrones has many players, but the Valonqar prophecy reminds us that, in the end, we are all bound by the same rules, subject to the same justice, and vulnerable to the same fate. The question is not whether Cersei Lannister will face the consequences of her actions, but who will be the instrument of that reckoning and what it will mean for everyone else who remains to play the game. In the world of ice and fire, winter is coming, but for Cersei Lannister, it is the hands of the Valonqar that represent the greatest threat. And when those hands finally close around her throat, they will be carrying with them the weight of every choice she has made, every life she has taken, and every prophecy she has tried so desperately to avoid. The little brother is coming, and with him comes the end of the reign of the woman who would be queen. The only question that remains is which little brother it will be, and whether Cersei will recognize her killer in the final moments before the prophecy claims her life and secures her place in the history of Westeros as the queen who was destroyed by the very words that were meant to prepare her for her destiny. The Valonqar prophecy stands as perhaps the most perfect expression of George R. R. Martin's approach to fantasy literature. It is complex without being incomprehensible, mysterious without being arbitrary, and profound without being pretentious. It combines the intimate drama of family conflict with the grand sweep of political intrigue, the personal with the universal, the specific with the archetypal. When the prophecy is finally fulfilled, it will serve as both a climax and a revelation, both an ending and a beginning. It will close the book on Cersei Lannister's story while opening new chapters in the lives of those who survive her. It will answer the question of who the Valonqar is while raising new questions about what that identity means for the future of Westeros and the ultimate resolution of the series. Overarching conflicts, the hands that will wrap around Cersei's throat are more than just instruments of death. They are the physical manifestation of consequences that have been building throughout the entire series. They represent the accumulated weight of every choice Cersei has made, every person she has wronged, and every opportunity for redemption she has rejected. They are the final arbiter of her fate and the ultimate expression of the justice that operates in Martin's morally complex universe. Whether those hands belong to a brother by blood, a brother by choice, or a brother by interpretation, they will be carrying out a sentence that was passed long before the prophecy was ever spoken. The Valonqar is not creating Cersei's fate. They are simply the instrument through which that fate is finally realized. And in that realization, we will find not just the resolution of one of literature's most compelling mysteries, but a deeper understanding of the forces that shape our world and the choices that define our lives. The Valonqar prophecy is, in the end, a mirror in which we can see reflected our own struggles with destiny, our own conflicts with family, and our own fears about the consequences of our actions. The little brother is coming, and with him comes the end of one story and the beginning of another. The only question that remains is whether we will be ready for the truths that his identity will reveal, and the changes that his actions will bring about in the world we have come to know and love. That, in the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. But the Valonqar prophecy reminds us that sometimes the greatest victory is simply being the one who gets to determine how the story ends. And for Cersei Lannister, that story is almost over. The only question is who will be holding the pen when the final words are written and the last breath is drawn from her pale white throat. The prophecy will be fulfilled, the debt will be paid, and the song of ice and fire will continue to play. But for the Queen Regent of the Seven Kingdoms, the music is almost over. The Valonqar is coming, and with him comes the end of everything she has fought to build and protect. The only question that remains is whether she will face her destiny with courage or with fear, with acceptance or with denial, with understanding, or with the same blind arrogance that has defined her reign from the very beginning. Asterisk, the hands are reaching for her throat, and the prophecy is about to be fulfilled. The Game of Thrones has claimed many victims, but none more significant than the woman who believed she could play by her own rules and win by her own definition of victory. The Valonqar is coming, and Cersei Lannister's time is almost up.